The group started out as the Toc-H Players, formed by the local branch of the Rainham Toc-H. Toc-H was formed in 1922 by Royal Charter for soldiers and victims of the Ypres conflict during the First World War.
Early records say in 1956 they produced a play called Sometimes Husbands Are a Problem. Some people say things may never change.
As the group grew in popularity, it was decided that the name should reflect its members. So after much discussion, the Rainham Amateur Theatrical Society was born.
The first production under the new banner was Great Day by Leslie Storm in 1948. Productions used to be in the Cooperative Hall, sadly now demolished, but is on the grounds where the Healthy Living Centre now stands.
In the early days, the group performed in St Margaret's Hall in Orchard Street. The hall was demolished in 2001, but as well they performed in festivals around the county of Kent.
By the 1960s, the group had made quite a name for themselves. In fact, their 1962 pantomime, Jack and the Beanstalk, sold way over 1,000 tickets, with coachloads arriving from the surrounding areas. They reached an agreement with Rainham Library in 1961 that the library could be used for rehearsals. However, it was deemed unsuitable for performance due to the closing time to the general public and the time needed to create an auditorium.
In late 1961, original member and secretary Mary Hopkins saw an advertisement in the local paper. It announced that part of the Oasthouse in Stratford Lane was for sale, with a suggested use of storage. Stratford, the birthplace of William Shakespeare. Could this have conjured up ideas in the members? Maybe.
At that point, the Oasthouse was already 100 years old. Local farmer Jack Clark agreed to let the society use 1/3 of the building rent-free. The society, led by Norman Booth, raised money by holding jumble sales, increasing subscriptions and continuing with productions at St Margaret's Hall. They also raised money by sponsoring a tile where you could have your name inscribed on it for posterity. The society continues with that today, with naming seats.
What they lacked in money, they certainly made up for in enthusiasm. Several members, namely Brenda Pearson, Zena Hadell and Betty Butcher, spent their evenings and weekends cleaning and renovating the building, whilst other members, Brian Philpott and Fred Adell, took over the building works, constructing floors and a new stage.
Apparently there were no creepy crawlies or spiders during the renovations of the theatre, and the reason being they think it was because of the sulphur sticks that were laid on top of the hops, which would act as a pesticide. Now, up until the mid-70s, the building next door, with 2/3 of the building, was still used as a working Oasthouse. So the theatre came to an agreement with the owners that they wouldn't put the sulphur on the hops until after 10 p.m. when there was a production on, because the fumes and the smell would seep through the walls into the auditorium and would affect the audiences.
June 1962 saw Gillingham Borough Council give approval for the old silo building to be turned into a social centre. In December of that year, Norman Booth mapped out plans to convert the Oasthouse into a theatre, in the hope that the society providing an amenity to Rainham that they did not already have, the council may give us a small grant. Now, this idea went through many councils, committees, subcommittees, and the idea was that the council may buy the building, renovate it, and then sublet it to the society. The owner then decided that he would rent the building to the society directly for £5 a week. Now, this meant a huge rise in membership fees. However, it didn't deter the members, who were preparing to open their doors to the public for the very first time.
On Friday, the 8th of November, the theatre was finally ready for opening night. It housed lighting, carpets, heating, and even a proscenium arch that came from the Globe Theatre in Chatham. Seating was acquired from the Naval Barracks canteen. Even the main doors came from a picture house
in Maidstone before it's demolished.
The bar, which was then situated at the top of the stairs, although finished with the help of Truman's Brewery, was unable to be used due to the licence still waiting approval from the fire brigade and the local police.
The curtains opened to a ripple of applause, and the auditorium was made up of invited guests and dignitaries. As the curtains opened on their first production, Billy Liar, the first person to appear on the Oasthouse stage was our longest serving and surviving member, Brenda Pearson, who played the part of Florence Boothroyd, Billy's grandmother.
Saturday, 9th of November 1963, saw the general public admitted to the theatre for the first time. They witnessed the first performance of what was at the time the world's only Oasthouse theatre.
February 1964, a land dispute threw the future of the society and the theatre into disarray. Ward's Construction Limited fenced off the land outside of the theatre. Now, this caused a major inconvenience not only to the theatre members, but to the local farmers and the builders. They also removed the fire escape, which had only been built the week before in order to comply with fire regulations. It was estimated that to replace it would cost £20.
Once the dispute was sorted out, focus was then on the council leasing the building to the theatre. And the plans were that they would then use some of the building to sublet to other groups or organisations within the community. Councillor R.W. Jones said in a letter, "The people of the theatre seem to be doing a very good job. They're working very hard, and the Oasthouse that they're putting together, I'm sure, will be an asset to Rainham and the community." And he urged the council to do what we can.
What it can turned out to be a grant of £50. The council had declined to buy the property because the owner had increased its value by £2,000. Discussions were made by the society as to whether the owner would accept a cash price of £3,000 instead of the asking price of £6,000. This was met by a counter-offer of £4,000 and backdated rent of £1,040. It had reached a stalemate. Mr. Clark believed his property to be worth a considerable amount of money, despite being in disrepair if it wasn't for the society's efforts.
After months of heated exchanges, an agreement was finally reached between the two parties. The Rainham Amateur Theatrical Society agreed to buy the building themselves for £4,800 to be repaid over 16 years.
Their first mortgage payment was made on the 1st of October 1966. At last, they had a theatre of their own.